I wanted to come on here and do an impromptu non-article style video. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but it's something that I saw on YouTube that prompted me to do this video. And it's actually a video in which I saw, and it's actually an old video, in which it was this little white girl who was recording herself going in a back and forth with her racist ass parents. And basically in the video, she's basically talking about, the racism that black people face in America and everything like that. And then, her parents would, they had the mindsets of your typical palm color supremacists and saying all types of different things. Y'all may know what video I am talking about because you may have seen it. Then in that same video, they did one where it was a Hispanic girl or a Latina girl basically doing the same thing. But that Latina girl, when she was talking to her parents, she actually broke down in tears because of the stuff that was coming out of her parents' mouth. That's why I said that black and brown coalition thing, it will never really pan out, at least on a collective, all in together when systemic things happen. Because they always say like black people, Latino people are affected, especially when it came to stop and frisk. They lumped us in there with that because they always see many of us, for the most part, under the same lens and microscope. But one thing that I was saying, it wasn't so much like in the video itself, but more so the comments and people who were reacting to it and everything. Because some people did reaction style videos to it and whatnot. And a lot of people really don't know what racism is. I can tell. Many people think that racism is merely just calling someone the N-word. Unfortunately, that's as far as racism will ever go for some people's psyche. I'm here to tell you that yes, being called a racial slur is a form of racism and displays you as a racist, but that's not the end all be all. As a matter of fact, it's actually one of the least of your worries when it comes to racism. It's actually near the bottom of the list as far as forms of racism. Towards the top of the list is something called systemic or systematic oppression or racism. That is true racism right there. When you have people that can keep you out of school because of the way that you wear your hair, and I've done so many videos about that, where you've had boys and girls wear braids and locks, especially in locks, have parts cut into their hair, wear their hair natural. When you can get kicked out of school for that or suspended at the least, that's systemic oppression. When the same thing with the job, if you wear your hair a certain way at your job and that they feel like they don't like, or they'll come up with some kind of a rule for it, because a lot of times you got to read between the lines of these rules that they put in place. A lot of the times that stuff is meant for a certain group of people. That's systemic. I did a video a couple years ago, I think on my original channel, where this young lady was training for a job, and she literally got to the end of her training, and that day that she got to the end, she decided to wear her hair in its natural setting. And they found any excuse to not give her the job, and it basically came down to how she wore her hair. The fact that you have states like California that has to put a law on the books that says you cannot oppress somebody because of the way that they wear their hair, and you can't kick them out of school or you can't deny them a job because of it. That's fighting back against something that's systematic. In 2020 or 2019, whenever it got implemented, it was one of these, I think it was last year. But see, some people don't dig deep enough when they get to that level. The same thing with the tattoos. Since when does having tattoos determine your level of intellect or your ability to perform a job? That's why when you think about stuff like this is why a lot of people go into business for themselves. Most likely nowadays a lot of online stuff, because it's non-discriminatory. I've seen many people who have what you would see as the stereotypical look, who have done online businesses and have flourished more than those who have denied them all kinds of jobs, sponsorships, scholarships, what have you. Some people may have a record and everything like that, and they still flourish. And that's another thing that can be seen as systemic. The prison industrial complex, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. Well, not company, but a multi-billion-dollar platform, I would say. Because when you think about it, the U.S. makes up a very small global population of the world. I think they said 4.25% of the world is just the U.S. A very small bunch. But when it comes to their prison population, it is extremely high. We have like the largest, if not the largest, prison population out of any nation in the world. And most of the people that's in these prisons look like you and I. I guess you can throw the Hispanic or Latinos in there as well, because they always lump us in there together, which is why I always say that they are the last group of people that should be trying to kiss white people's ass, because they'll always lump us in there together no matter what. But I still don't believe that black and brown coalition thing is very much real. Not saying that people who are black and Hispanic can't be friends, or they aren't, they can't develop relationships with each other on an intimate level, even down to the point with them getting married. But I'm talking about as a collective unit, there's always been some kind of friction there. But when it comes to systematic oppression, they will always lump us into that bubble. Always. And if they don't lump us, it'll just be us. That's probably why so many Latinos try to distance themselves from us, because they don't want to be lumped in. And they see it for what it is, but many of them will deny it. But, I don't want to go into, all the way into that territory, because I think y'all get exactly what I'm saying. But systemic oppression is the deep root. I've done my sundown towns. The fact that you had towns at one point, in some cases still around, that doesn't allow black people to go over to a certain part of town after the sun goes down, literally how it got its name, that's systemic. The fact that, black towns have been destroyed off of hearsay, which mostly was a bunch of lies. All of them was pretty much lies. That's systemic oppression. And the fact that they can bury that history to the point where no one talks about it, that's also systemic as well. The fact that you can take our history and put it into a book and then bastardize it to try to make it seem like what happened to us wasn't so bad, that is deeper than being called the N-word. Yes, we know being called the N-word stings, but it's not the worst thing that could happen to us. That's just a little, that's a crumb in a chip bag. There's so much more to it than just the N-word, and unfortunately for us, that's as far as we can see. But it's not all completely our fault, because we've had these blinders placed in front of us. That's all we'll ever see. Whenever they can come out and say, oh, the reason why this is happening to you is because you kill your own, or black on black crime in the 13% and 50%. And now that whole interracial crime thing that they're throwing out there, which does not make a lick of sense. That can be seen as systematic as well, because guess what? They only throw black on black crime onto us, to the point where now they try to say, oh, now black on white crime is increasing and everything like that. So now that's something else they're doing to make us look even more savage. When it's something called proximity crime, it happens in every community. White people whose numbers of proximity crime is literally about 4% off from ours. I think we are at last I looked, it was in the 80s, like what, 88%, and theirs was like 83, 82. So they make it seem like it's a huge gap when it's not. But see, the thing is, they don't call it white on white crime. They don't call it Asian on Asian crime. They don't call it Hispanic on Hispanic crime. They don't call it Native American on Native American crime, Arab on Arab, so on and so forth. They only make it black on black crime. And the reason why they keep doing it is because they know that if they can just call it proximity crime, that means they got to examine all the other types of proximity crime that is out there. And they're not going to do it. You can just look at the FBI crime stats, but notice on that crime stat, they only always focus on the murder homicide part, which is like one of the only categories that black people allegedly lead in. But if you look at every other category, with maybe the exception of one other, they lead in a high amount, but they never talk about it. They never talk about it. And they'll use that as a talking point so it make it seem like we can't get any type of assistance or we can't get any help. And speaking of assistance, they always like to say we're the welfare kings and the welfare queens. Well, you couldn't really tell by how many of them had their goddamn handout these last few months due to the woo-woo. How many of them out there crying right now because their $600 got cut off and now they might have to go down to $400? Or how they acted an ass, at the state capitol, at the state house in Michigan back in April. That's another thing. They get to demonstrate like the way that they did, but if we do, it's all types of lenses put onto us, asking why we're doing this, why are we doing that, why are we carrying firearms, even though it's a legal right to have, but they always question why we do it. It's always a question as to why we do what we do, even though it's our God-given American citizen given right to do so, because many of them do not see us as American citizens. As a matter of fact, even deeper, many of them don't see us as human beings. It's in the Constitution, that 3/5 compromise. 3/5 of a human being, meaning you're not completely human. You're teeter-tottering between human being and some other outworldly entity that doesn't exist except with only us. Like I told you, you have to really think beyond the N-word. I think I might actually title the video, because I was going to actually title it something else, but I think I might call it that. Think beyond the N-word, because it's way deeper than one would think. There's so many examples out there that can be given. So many. You just have to do the research, and you have to know who you're researching. It's the knowledge is out there. I'm just giving y'all a piece of it, and that's just based off of videos that I have done on my channel for the last 4.5 years. I've gained so much knowledge from these videos. Some people say, I get on here and I read an article and everything like that, but I analyze what I'm reading as well. And a lot of it comes from not just reading these articles, but also listening to others who maybe talk about the same things I do. And then I also go and do my own research as well. That's called being an analytical and critical thinker, which unfortunately many people are not. Some won't even take the time to actually read the material. They'll go off of whatever somebody just puts out there as gospel and just run with it, because if it satisfies them, it soothes them, it makes them feel comfortable. Not everyone can, get up here and talk about the stuff that I do. It's a few people that can, but not everyone's willing to do so. But imagine if we had more people that, I'm not going to say have the guts to do it. I'm just going to say had the willpower to do. It's not for everybody, but it should be, in my honest opinion, because we need more voices. I've talked about this over and over again, that we need more voices to talk about this type of, this type of thing, because it's one thing when you have a few voices, but when you have many, it's massive. It's powerful. You get more views, you get more eyes, you get more attention. And that's how it should be. But like I said before, this goes beyond, way beyond the N-word. And unfortunately, even as I'm speaking in this video and putting this out there, and with all the examples I just gave, and there's so many more that I could give, but I don't want to just start rambling, even though I think I'm probably heading to that territory. Most people won't get it. They still won't get it because their mind won't allow them to think past what they want to think past. They only say we use a certain percentage of our brain. I would like to think that by me thinking more outwardly, doing these commentaries, that I've started to unlock some pieces of my brain that were once completely shut, even last year, because I've allowed myself to think more further ahead than most people will allow their brain to do so. But it is what it is. It's like that old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can lead a person to knowledge, but you can't make them think.